تحدثنا كثيراً عن صناع التغيير هذا الصباح، وأنا على استعداد للمراهنة أن بعض الحاضرين يتساءلون: حسناً، ما الذي يعنيه بالضبط أن تكون صانع التغيير؟ ماذا يعني أن نخالف ما هو شائع ونتبع أحلامنا وشغفنا؟ نحن نعلم أن القيام بهذا الشيء ليس سهلاً. إذن كيف نستمر في العمل عندما يبدو أن كل الاحتمالات ليست في صفنا؟
And of course, now we've been talking a lot about change makers this morning. And I'm willing to bet that few of you probably understand what does it mean to be a change maker. Now, what does it mean to go against the grain and follow our dreams and passions? And we know doing all of this can't be easy. So, how do we keep going when it can seem like all the odds are stacked against us?
حسناً، هذا ما سيتحدث عنه المتحدثون في مناقشتنا التالية، وجميعهم تركوا بصمة لأنفسهم من خلال البقاء أوفياء لطبيعتهم وما يريدون فعله في حياتهم.
Well, that's exactly what the speakers of our next panel are going to be talking about, all of whom have made a mark for themselves by staying true to who they are and what they want to do with their lives.
سيداتي وسادتي، أرجو الترحيب على المسرح.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage
ماريا صبح، الشريك المؤسس ورئيسة التصميم والإبداع ومديرة العمليات لشركة The Concept.
Maria Sobh, the co-founder, chief design and creation officer and COO of The Concept.
حياة الحسن، الشريك المؤسس لشركة Sweech.
Hayat Al-Hassan, the co-founder of Sweech.
إحسان الحايك، المدير الإقليمي لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا في شركة دابي.
Ihsan Al-Hayek, the regional manager for the MENA at Dapi.
ومنار الهنائي، المؤسسة المشاركة لمجلة سكة والتي ستدير هذه المحادثة أيضاً.
And Manar Al-Hinai, the co-founder of Sekka, who will also be moderating this conversation.
سيداتي وسادتي، المسرح لكم.
Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Is it working? Okay. Good morning, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and good morning, dear panelists. Thank you for investing your time with us this morning. My name is Manar Al-Hinai, and I'm the co-founder and storyteller-in-chief of Sekka magazine and creative platform. Today, we have an inspiring panel of changemakers with remarkable stories, and we'll be hearing from them about the changes, the challenges, and opportunities their sectors present, and their outlooks and hopes for the next 50 years. But before we dive into that, let's touch upon something important about having the right support system, or the home, as Najla has labeled it earlier. Because essentially, it is the right support system that can often help us realize our dreams. What I love about today's session is how the four of us have Shira Entrepreneurship Center in common, and how, till this day, it serves as our support system. Ihsan, I've known you for several years now, and you proudly mention in almost every conversation that you were number 7 at Shira, and how Shira inspired you to start your entrepreneurship journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Manar. And I truly think, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I truly believe that the expression life-changing should not be thrown around very often. But I can safely say that crossing road with Najla and with the Shira team a few years earlier was definitely a life-changing event. And that's for a simple reason that my interaction with Shira was way before I had a business or I was part of a thriving tech company. It was back when I was just a student, basically with a dream that one day I want to be part of a story. And, but in my head, the story always felt like it's maybe 10 or 15 years away, right? Because of all the limitation and the things that we need to do. I truly think what's special about Shira is their, insane care and, investment in the youth. And when I crossed road with Najla, they showed us that this dream is possible now, and they showed us a way, and they showed us how they can support. So basically, if you enter their world and you pretty much show the will, the Shira team will spare no effort in pushing you beyond your limits, and kind of all the way up from the insane support system to the workshop, the hackathon, the introduction to investors, introduction to corporate, government, etc. Really, everything Najla mentioned on stage, I was able to live that and experience that, and it's just a genuine feeling that they really want to help the ecosystem. So no matter where you're from, who you are, and what you're trying to do, we always had this feeling that it's a family and the sky is the limit. So I truly believe that these interaction and this belief have definitely shaped the person I am today and prepared us to take on these challenges. It's being managing a tech company in this thriving ecosystem. So I met 5 other core members of the Shira company at Shira, and basically Dapi was born in the UAE in 2019. I'm proud to say that a few months later we got accepted into the Y Combinator in San Francisco, and we were actually top 5% for the 2020 cohort. And fast forward to today, Dapi is now available in 4 markets across MENA, in addition to the US, serving clients like Western Union, Policy Bazaar, Al Verdan, and many others. So Najla, thank you for truly believing in us.
Just like you, Ihsan, Shira has been a home for us too at Sekka. I've joined the Shira cohort a few months after we had launched Sekka magazine and creative platform. And 3 years after we had graduated, up until this day, we still feel that Shira is home. The continuous support that they provide us, whenever there's an opportunity for growth, the team makes sure that we are part of that. Speaking of connections, Maria, you started your journey when you were a student in university, and I know that Shira has helped open the doors for the concept with leading entities in the United Arab Emirates. How important was that to you as a student with a big dream, and how did it help pave the way for you into the business world?
For sure. I had just graduated a few months out of university, and I did not study how to start a startup at all. We don't study that. I studied interior design, which had nothing to do with entrepreneurship and starting a startup. And I remember when we first had the initial idea, and Shira very welcomely and humbly opened the doors for us, and we walked into the space, and it was back in AUS. We walked into the space, and suddenly you were filled in a room where people were confidently passionate about taking their ideas and actually implementing them in the world. And that's something that I didn't learn in university, and it's something that you don't really have a course for. It just comes through experience and through passion. Shira literally applied mentorship, support system, and they gave us a community that you can't put a price on. And I would confidently say that Shira's community is not like an incentive program, right? It's a lifelong community where even up until now, we have the Shira team members just calling us up and just so sweetly just asking us for updates and inviting us for so many things and making the right connections for us. So I can confidently and humbly say that coming out of university, I would have never came into the startup life if I didn't have a safe community where it was safe to make mistakes in, to grow my ideas and actually apply them to the real world. So I'm super grateful.
Absolutely. Hayat, how has Shira helped you in your entrepreneurial journey so far?
My story with Shira is a little bit different because I haven't really been part of the family as you described, Manar, but it was actually a series of serendipitous moments that led me to be sitting on the stage right now It started with a response that I wrote to an article on Twitter. And to my surprise, the author, Dr. Amira Al-Hussein, reached out to me just a few minutes later and really encouraged me to elaborate on my response with an article. And with her incredible support, I wrote my first article on the tech ecosystem. And a few weeks later, after our first interaction, she put out a tweet to try and get it recognized and published. And that is when Najla Al-Midfa' reached out. And I'm very thankful for that, because she not only offered to connect me to the right people, but she also offered to personally support us with Sweech and invited me to sit on this panel today. This actually was not the first time that the Shira team reaches out to offer their support, but this moment was truly a heartfelt moment for me, because it made me realize that this is a team that not only is out there supporting entrepreneurs who are part of the Shira family, as you just heard, but it is also a team that is actively engaging with and enriching the ecosystem as a whole. And if I may redirect this to the young, ambitious souls out there, I know it can sometimes feel like we're going against the grain and that we are on this journey all alone, but trust me, there are people within our communities like Dr. Amira, like Najla Al-Midfa' and the Shira team who are eager to support you for no other reason than to see you succeed. So I'm very grateful for that, and it makes me hopeful for the future that we're building here.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Let's rewind back a bit and talk about the inspiration behind your businesses and the gaps in the market that your business is closing. Hayat, when we spoke, you told me that one of the reasons why you started Sweech is because you wanted people to get out and explore the UAE more. What is the story behind Sweech?
So it's no secret that there is a great challenge when it comes to mobility in our region. And quite a few of us have experienced this challenge firsthand, and a few of you in the crowd have tackled that challenge head on. And not only that, but we've seen some incredible success in building transport solution. At Sweech, we are really inspired to build on top of that. We recognize that mobility is not only the ability to move from one place to another, but it is also about the joy of freedom and mobility that allows you to engage with the world around you. Whenever I meet people who have been in the UAE for a few years, I'm always curious to learn more about their experience. What have they seen? Who have they met? What are the communities that they've engaged with? And after a few too many interactions, I realized that it just became so clear to me that there are so many among us who come to this country excited about the experiences it has to offer, and yet when they arrive, they tend to be restricted to certain routes and areas between their home and workplace, and that tends to be because of the inaccessibility of just simply getting around. Of course, this is a challenge that also extends to tourists, where it hinders their ability to truly connect with the cities and communities that we have here at a much deeper level.
Maria, I'm a big fan of the concept, and with the UAE's focus on sustainability, the products and solutions you develop at the concept align greatly with the UAE's vision. Tell us more about the inspiration behind the concept. Why did you decide to follow that path?
Yeah, so at the concept, what we do is that we develop sustainable hardware and software solutions to help companies and organizations apply these sustainable solutions into their business model in a cost-effective way. That's essentially what we do. Where our inspiration came from is truly from the frustration of having to watch such large organizations, I would say, degrade the word sustainability and its true meaning. The frustration came about when we started to meet all these big organizations, and we would see their drive and all their marketing stunts of how sustainable they are, and we'd be happy, genuinely happy. But when we started to go behind the scenes and getting to know their strategies, it came to our attention that it wasn't actually sustainable. And so our root of inspiration really came out from that frustration in a positive way, where we want to educate organizations, we want to implement solutions that are sustainable, cost-effective, affordable, and we want to prove to organizations that, hey, you can implement sustainable solutions into your business model in a way that's not going to cost you more than a regular solution. And that's always very hard for organizations to believe. The other issue that we drove inspiration from is we saw a lot of organizations advertising that they're sustainable, and so once we went behind the scenes, we saw that the individuals behind them were not fully educated in that area. So that lack of knowledge over sustainability, it's similar to what Najla had mentioned in the previous one. If the individual is not themselves driven, how can you have a driven company? So in our area, it's like if the individual themselves are not educated over the sustainable matter, how are they leading a sustainable company, and how can they claim that? So the frustration came from that, and it turned into inspiration in a positive way. So that's what we're trying to change.
Beautiful story. Each of your stories is unique in its own way, and I really salute you for your perseverance, for daring to start something new. But let's talk about the challenges and the opportunities. I believe that a lot of our challenges emerge during the early stages of when launching a business, and some of them we'll have to deal with them always. When I first started Sekka, for example, and we talked about this, Ihsan, one of the challenges we faced was onboarding talents and working with them remotely before COVID normalized it. Hassan, you working in the fintech sector, I remember you saying that during COVID you've onboarded teams and you have team members that you haven't met yet and you look forward to meeting. But what about the other challenges that you face?
Absolutely. So just for the audience, when we started Dapi, we wanted to build our own fintech application here in the market. Me and my co-founder, we came from engineering and finance kind of background, and we decided to build a fintech solution. But when we looked at the region, we realized that there is a very key component missing in this market, which is the connection layer between the fintech application and their customer-based bank account. So if you look at the UK, for example, this concept is called open banking. Open banking will allow fintech and third party to connect securely to your business account as a user to streamline the process of sharing financial data and initiating low-cost payment. So the US have their own market-led solution that is comparable to the open banking. We look at this market and we realize this gap is missing. So we decided, instead of building one more fintech application, we decided to build the infrastructure and build this connection layer ourselves to enable the next wave of financial application here in the region, not only building one more on our own. And today I'm proudly say that Dapi is available in 4 markets, enabling fintech application to provide a very unique value proposition, more custom product for their clients, and pretty much taking the region to an international standard. Obviously, we launched in 2019, so right before the pandemic, and one of the challenges was, as you said, onboarding team member across the world. Especially, we have operation in the US, and some team member, they're a key team member in the team, and they still haven't met in person. So keeping the culture going and keeping a team on one energy level was absolutely a challenge at the beginning, but I feel as we progressed, we became really good at that, and it turns into an advantage rather than a disadvantage. The next thing is, we believe innovation precedes regulation. So the nature of what we do is definitely, innovational and considered an innovation in this market. So talking to regulators, convincing them to take a shot at us was definitely a challenge in the beginning. But thankfully, we've been able to incorporate, our startup in the sandbox of ADGM, where they allowed us to operate temporarily until we've proven value based in the market. So that was extremely helpful. One of the other challenges is obviously fundraising. So we raised $7 million to date, but we feel that fundraising on a screen was definitely harder than doing it face to face. So we're absolutely happy to be back with physical interaction. The other thing I feel, being a MENA company and a company that's born out of the UAE, it's a very young company, less than 2 years. We got some heat for expanding to the US too quickly, but I felt that just because we're in the middle of a pandemic and being in a Y Combinator in San Francisco, we realized that Dapi can fill in a very important gap in the US market. And it's very difficult to say no when you have 6-figure contracts on the table, when you're trying to survive. So I felt that here the mentality is, you're a MENA company, stay in MENA. But if you look at the history, there's a lot of example where companies just been able to follow opportunity and offer, get the best of two worlds. So those are some of the challenges that we faced while navigating a tech startup in this very competitive market, I would say.
And I think many of us in this room could relate to that, especially working with the team during the pandemic. Hayat, your concept is extremely unique, and I know that one of your goals is to develop it to be a peer-to-peer solution. What challenges do you currently face in that regard, and what opportunities does this sector present to UAE-based entrepreneurs, in your opinion?
So, one of the greatest challenges that we faced actually has to do with regulations. When we started off, my co-founders and I were set out to build a platform for peer-to-peer car rentals. And we believe that there is an opportunity there to make cars more accessible and affordable, while also opening a door for micro-entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, because of the regulations around car rentals, we were stopped from pursuing this model even before we were able to launch. It's actually more put on hold because the regulations are still being processed. But this is a challenge that is not specific to Sweech. So many of us in the region face the challenge of regulations, and while entrepreneurs are persistent and they find ways around these challenges, what concerns me is that this challenge of regulation actually slows us down as an ecosystem to innovate, right? Not just entrepreneurs, but the ecosystem as a whole is hindered from being able to quickly innovate and build new solutions. And so, I'd like to pose a question there. I don't know the answer to this, but I hope that we can find an answer together. What is it that we can do in order to give entrepreneurs the buffer and the space they need to test out their ideas and to experiment with new business models?
Absolutely. Maria, from our conversation around the concept, you mentioned that you want sustainability to become the norm. What kind of challenges do you currently face at the concept, and why should more businesses think about providing sustainable solutions?
Sure. So I am a true believer that sustainability should be normal. It shouldn't be misused as a buzzword or as an achievement, or, yeah, sure, create recognition and create awareness, and I think that's super important for people that are not aware. But I also feel like at some point it should really become normal, and it shouldn't be such a big deal to be able to implement sustainable solutions. For us specifically, I'll write off as well what Hayat said, is that sometimes certain things will slow you down down in order to innovate. So a lot of the organizations that we deal with are huge, huge, huge corporates. And if they are not ready to implement sustainable solutions that look very different to what previously they've been doing, then that's going to cause startups as well to really slow down on the innovation process and put a roadblock, because if we're not able to implement it and successfully launch it in huge organizations that would actually benefit from this, then what are we doing as startups, right? And that's also a certain point where in this specific challenge where we're facing the issue of wanting sustainability to be normal, Shira has really supported that in the area where they put us in front of these huge organizations, but they don't just leave us there. They literally train us, whether it's through mentorship, keynote presentations, back-on-back meetings, late nights. It's crazy how much they have prepped us to go in front of these large corporates. And I can give you one example is that Shira has put us in front of Air Arabia, for example. Back then, I was 22 years old. I wanted to sell what our company was doing to them, right? And I would say it's impossible for a 22-year-old that studied interior design that wants to sell a sustainable solution to Air Arabia. Sorry about that. But I mean, yeah, that's the main challenge, is making sustainability normal and not such a misused buzzword. And yeah, just fill up that lack of knowledge, truly.
Interesting points. Moving on to the future, in a few days we'll be celebrating the UAE's 50th birthday. And in true UAE forward-looking fashion, I'd love to hear more about the future hopes and aspirations that you have for your businesses and also for your relevant sectors. Hayat, as a person who's passionate about technology and also wanting to encourage people to drive, explore the UAE and the world, and I know that you have hopes for young entrepreneurs in the UAE to join the tech sector. What are your hopes and aspirations for the next 50 years?
Well, through Sweech and through other mobility startups, what I hope that we'd be able to achieve is really giving every individual in the UAE and across the MENA region the freedom to move around and get around, and for every person to have that feeling of joyfulness and being able to explore around. I'd also love to touch upon, more specifically, the tech startup industry. My hope is that we are going to be able to compete globally, not only in building scalable and profitable startups and scale-ups, but also be able to compete in building startups and that address challenges that really require new innovative technical solutions. There are, of course, different factors that come into this. Some were already addressed in the previous session, but this is something that we don't talk about too often, the importance of having a very strong tech and product culture in an ecosystem, in a tech ecosystem. Magnus mentioned this earlier. He spoke about the challenge of opening up opportunities for talent in the region. And I want to add to that by speaking more specifically of the development of tech talent. When it comes to tech talent, I experienced exactly what Magnus spoke about, which is, as I graduated, I wanted to go and build a career in software engineering, but the opportunities were very, very limited to go into a startup and learn from experienced people what it takes to build scalable and reliable solutions. And so I believe that if we're able to nail this factor down, it'll help us not only in supporting the ecosystem as a whole, but it'll really open up the door for us to start innovating with technology and not only with our business models.
Excellent points. Ihsan, as Dapi grows and expands and which will have, inshallah, an international presence, how do you imagine the fintech sector evolving in the region and the UAE? And what message do you have for entrepreneurs looking to enter the fintech industry?
Absolutely. I think as Dapi, we believe the global trend when it comes to fintech is for big tech companies to slowly offer financial services for their customers. So if you look at Apple, for example, they started with the Apple Card, they partner up with Goldman Sachs. If you look at Uber now, they're opening bank accounts for their drivers and offering them Uber branded cards. Look at Starbucks, for example. Starbucks wallet has more than $1.5 billion in customers' money. And you can only purchase coffee with it. They can invest it anywhere else. So that the global trend is for tech companies to move into eventually into fintechs. This trend is called embedded finance, and it's $1 trillion trend. Now, this model is able to work in markets like the US because you partner up with one bank and you get access to 380 million users. Look at the Eurozone, for example. You partner with one bank and pretty much one single regulation. If we want to import this trend and basically to the MENA region, we need to overcome the challenge of a fragmented market and fragmented regulation, where every small market has its own regulatory framework and its own requirements. And that's pretty much the problem that Dapi is trying to solve by partnering up with one local bank per market. We're able to provide a connection layer for big companies to communicate with Dapi, and Dapi will streamline the process of dealing with bank and dealing with regulation. So when we look at the UAE as a hub for entrepreneurship, I think the government of the UAE have been taking major steps into the right direction with the new types of visas, the freelancer visa, the investor visa, and with a single person entity. Those are all, in addition to a great infrastructure, great lifestyle, those are all, tick all the boxes when it comes to an attractive environment for entrepreneurs. And I truly believe that the UAE is set to be the fintech hub in the region. It's just a matter of time. So really nothing to add from my side on the UAE side, but I would love for the UAE to take an initiative. I think the UAE is in a great position to take an initiative with the other GCC company and other MENA markets to provide a unified framework to streamline this regulation across the board and open up MENA for global companies and enable local companies to expand. Because fintech, what they need is pretty much access to market. They need millions of users to be able to become profitable and to be able to build a successful story. So I truly believe the UAE is in the perfect position to take this lead. And my message to new entrepreneurs, I would say, if you are in this country, just count your blessing and honestly, I don't think that Dapi would be able to come into existence and scale if it wasn't for this market and for the like of Shira believing in us. Again, no matter where you're from, where you are in entrepreneurial journey, you always have a place that you call home that you can rely on and make sure they will open the right doors for you and provide you the support and initiative. And that's really would be my message is just, all you have to do is pretty much show a will and approach them. And I think we're blessed to be in this beautiful country.
I absolutely agree. And to add to your points both, I think from my side, what I'd love to see more is more successful media stories from the UAE. I'd love to see independent publications partnering up with international media. I'd love to see media publications born and made in the UAE have international editions. So I think what we all have in common is big dreams and hopes for the region and for the business. Last but not least, Maria, sustainability is at the heart of the UAE's policies, and it's also at the core of the concept. What do you hope to see more of in that regards?
I would really hope to see a lot more of community that nurtures ideas, whether it's sustainability or any hardware innovation. What Shira is doing has that facility and has that nurturing, and I want to see more. I want to see even more of that, because imagine you're fresh out of university with great ideas. What do you do with that idea? How are you supposed to know what to do with an idea? Is it even feasible? Why do I even care? Who's going to listen to me? I think that's the place where we were stuck at initially, so I'd love to see that further develop for students, especially students, because I feel like the generation that's currently there in the organizations, they're great, they're doing well, but they've been doing it for decades, and it's time for a change, definitely. It's time to move forward. Not saying that right now we're living in any regret, but it's time to change things for the better. And to do that, you need to nurture the students that are upcoming. They need a space, they need trust, they need a space where they can make mistakes, they need a space where they can be heard, they can know where to go. And it's currently booming right now for sure, but I'd love to see it more over the next 50 years, I hope. And at the same time, to hear more from the UAE government of how they're going to implement certain sustainable practices and laws as well. But of course, keeping in mind that it has to be achievable within the MENA region or at least within the UAE. So I'd love to see that structure build itself up in order to accommodate all these laws that will really catapult the UAE into a leading sustainable pinnacle all around the world. And we'd love to see it be born here rather than be brought from outside.
Thank you so much, Maria. I would love for you, our dear audience, to think about the next 50 years. How do you imagine the business scene evolving? And what would be your role in it? Remember, your business idea can be the one improving and changing the world forever. And luckily, we have places like Shira and like Najla that you can count on. Thank you for tuning in. Our panelists will be around should you have any questions after the session.